أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم أصلح لنا ديننا الذي هو عصمة أمرنا، وأصلح لنا دنيانا التي فيها معاشنا، وأصلح لنا آخرتنا التي إليها معادنا، واجعل الحياة زيادة لنا في كل خير، واجعل الموت راحة لنا من كل شر. Alright, so what is Hadith 44?
44.
You're gonna have to... Huh? No?
No. You're gonna correct me too many times. I don't want that.
Okay. Alaikum assalam. So, عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام قال الرضاعة تحرم ما تحرم الولادة. So the Prophet ﷺ said عليكم السلام ورحمة الله, that breastfeeding makes haram what childbirth makes haram. Breastfeeding makes haram what childbirth makes haram. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about what does childbirth make haram? What does childbirth make haram? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ. Meaning, حُرِّمَت, this tahrim here is the tahrim of marriage. Right? You can't marry these, so the man can't marry these women. Does that make sense? So the first person that you can't marry is your mother, ummahatukum, wa banatukum, your daughters. Okay. So these are all blood relationships. Okay. But in this hadith, it says that breastfeeding makes haram what childbirth makes haram. So the same applies for breastfeeding. So as your mother is haram for you to marry, so is your breastfeeding mother. Does that make sense?
Yes.
As your daughters are haram for you to marry, so are your breastfeeding daughters. How could your breastfeeding daughters be haram for you? If your wife breastfeeds a girl, right?
But her daughter means you.
So that is your daughter as well. Yes. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because it does the exact same thing that childbirth does. Ummahatukum wa banatukum wa akhawatukum, your sisters. Right? So if you were breastfed by a mother, by a lady, then if that lady had daughters, it's haram for you to marry those daughters. Does that make sense? Or if your mother breastfed a girl, it's haram for you to marry that girl. Does that make sense? وَعَمَّاتُكُمْ, also your father's sisters are haram for you to marry. Does that make sense? وَخَالَاتُكُمْ, your mother's sisters are haram for you to marry. وَبَنَاتُ الْأَخِ, and the daughters of your brother. Right? So also your brother's breastfed daughters are also haram for you. Does that make sense? وَبَنَاتُ الْأُخْتِ, and the daughters of your sister are also haram for you to marry. وَأُمَّهَاتُكُمُ اللَّاتِي أَرْضَعْنَكُمْ, and the mothers that breastfed you. وَأَخَوَاتُكُمْ مِنَ الرَّضَاعَةِ, and your sisters from breastfeeding. Right? وَرَبَائِبُكُمُ أَخَوَاتُكُمْ مِنَ الرَّضَاعَةِ وَأُمَّهَاتُ نِسَائِكُمْ وَأُمَّهَاتُ نِسَائِكُمْ, and then the mothers of your wives. So your wife's mother, also haram for you to marry. By the way, all of these ladies that are haram for you to marry, you can see them without hijab. Does that make sense? All of the ones that are haram for you to marry, you can see them without hijab. Your nieces, your aunts, your mother's, obviously your mother's, so your wife's mother, right? أمهات نسائكم وربائبكم اللاتي في حجوركم. Also, your wife's daughter.
Or from another father.
Right. So if your wife previously had a marriage, they got divorced or whatever happened, she's not married anymore, she has a daughter. That daughter, you cannot marry her. Does that make sense? Basically, a full marriage. This marriage that you married this lady to, it had to have been a full marriage, not just a marriage by contract. Does that make sense? You can't marry her daughter. Does that make sense? وحلائل أبنائكم. Also,
Brother, what hadith number is this?
44.
44.
Thank you.
وحلائل أبنائكم الذين من أصلابكم. Right? Also, the wife of your son. Obviously, after they got divorced or he died or whatever, you can't marry her. Meaning that your daughter-in-law cannot wear hijab. She doesn't have to wear hijab in front of you. Does that make sense? وأن تجمعوا بين الأختين إلا ما قد سلف. Also, you cannot marry two sisters together. Right? You can't marry a lady and her sister at the same time. Does that make sense? Right? But he said إلا ما قد سلف. Except for if you were married to her sister before and then now you married the sister after. That's halal. We have a case that happened of Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu, right? Who was married to, I don't remember who was first, I think it was Ruqayya, to the Prophet ﷺ's daughter, and then she died, and then he married the other one, right? Kulthum. I don't remember which one was first off.
So it's not allowed at the same time
Yes, you can't marry them at the same time.
while they're both alive. Like if they
Yeah,
passed
it doesn't
away.
matter what it is, as long as you're not married at the same time.
Yeah.
That's haram. Okay, so now I went through all of that in regards to marriage, but the point of this hadith is that whatever is haram, alaykum assalam wa rahmatullah, in childbirth is also haram in breastfeeding. So all of these categories that I mentioned, or that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in this ayah, all of these categories are haram in breastfeeding as well. So I mean, even the last one where two sisters, right? Where this lady has a sister who is a sister of breastfeeding. You can't be married to them at the same time. Does that make sense? So, in short, what the Prophet ﷺ said is that breastfeeding makes haram what childbirth makes haram. Okay? Any questions about that? No. Why is this even mentioned? What's the point in mentioning this in this book? Because again, this book, the purpose of this book is to give us the basics of Islam. Right? So, there can be a misunderstanding that the basics of Islam means, what do I believe? But you have to understand that your actions are related to your belief. They're connected. Well, how are they connected? Your actions and your belief. Because when you believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala 100%, then you take everything He gave us. He said do this, you do it. He said don't do that, you don't do it. It's blind following of Allah. Completely blind following. Whether we understand the significance of it or not. Back in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, in the Jahiliyyah, before Islam, it was normal for example, a guy to be married to two sisters. It was completely normal. It happened all the time. And now the Quran says you can't do that. A question might be why? Right? But that wasn't the question. It was Allah said this? Okay, it's done. There was a Sahabi who came to the Prophet ﷺ. He had 10 wives. So the Prophet ﷺ said, choose 4 and let 6 go. There wasn't why, but this is these are no, it was done. That was it. Because of the understanding that this is Islam. I take it as it is. Does that make sense? I don't question it. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us, and I don't question it. And that goes for every single aspect of our lives. It goes for how do we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how do we use the restroom, akramakumullah, how do we clean ourselves, how do we wake up, how do we go to sleep, how do we, the list goes on. In every single interaction that we have in our lives. How do we interact with our parents? How do we interact with our spouses? How do we interact with our children? How do we interact with our relatives? So on and so forth. All of these things, they are directly related to our belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the more that we believe in Allah, the more that we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the more that we follow him, or we follow the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Okay? Any questions about that hadith? All right. So let's continue to the next hadith. Any volunteers?
Yeah. No, 45.
Hadith number 45. But Idris, I think you're the only one that has it.
My glasses not here too.
I'll give you mine.
It doesn't work. My subscription.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله عن جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله عنهما أنه سمع رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عام الفتح وهو بمكة يقول إن الله ورسوله حرم بيع الخمر والميتة والخنزير والأصنام فقيل يا رسول الله أرأيت شحوم الميتة فإنها يطلى بها السحوم ويدهن بها الجلود ويستصبح بها الناس فقال لا هو حرام ثم قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم عند ذلك قاتل الله اليهود إن الله حرم عليهم الشحوم فأجملوه ثم باعوه فأكلوا ثمنه رواه البخاري ومسلم.
So, Jabir ibn Abdullah radiallahu anhu, he narrates this hadith that the Prophet ﷺ, he said that إِنَّ اللَّهَ حَرَّمَ عَلَيْكُمْ الْمَيْتَةَ وَالْأَصْنَامِ وَالْخَنْزِيرِ. Is that right? حرم بيع الخمر والميتة والخنزير والأصنام. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made haram the selling of khamr, alcohol, mayta, which is a dead animal. Dead animal meaning that it wasn't slaughtered.
Carrion.
Huh?
Carrion, I mean like roadkill and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, is that what it's called? Carrion?
Carrion, yeah.
How do you spell that?
Carion.
Carrion. Okay. New word I learned. Jazakallah khair. Okay, so he made haram alcohol, selling of alcohol, and mayta, a carrion or a dead animal, right? An animal that was not slaughtered correctly. And what do you call it? Pigs? Swine? What is the difference between pig and a swine?
The same thing? Yeah,
Okay.
same thing.
And idols. Allah made all of these things haram, right? To sell them. He's not talking about how they're used or whatever. To sell them. As a matter of fact, scholars have concluded that there is a principle that is taken from this. Anything that is haram to do or use, it's haram to sell. Anything that's haram to do or use, it's haram to sell, to do business with. Right? So business should be done with things that are halal. Does that make sense? I think that's very clear. فقيل يا رسول الله, right? Is that what was after that? فقيل يا رسول الله أرأيت شحوم الميتة. They said, Ya Rasulullah, what about the fat of the dead or the carrion, right? Because, so what happens is you can have a situation like, for example, a roadkill, right? You hit a deer. You're just gonna let that go to waste? How about you use it? You get what I'm saying? Or sell it. Right? It's the meta, but I mean, you just accidentally killed it. You want to use it, right? Why would you let it go to waste? By the way, if you accidentally hit a deer and you have a knife on you,
Bismillah. Bismillah.
right? Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and make sure you could eat it. I don't know if you guys ever had deer before, but
How is it?
deer?
Yeah.
It's like somewhere between
It's like beef and
lamb and beef, somewhere between the two. But you got to know how to cook it.
yeah.
You have to put a lot of garlic in it because it's gamey.
You gave me
Yeah. But it's good if you know how to cook it right.
up north they make when I was working in Green Bay they had like venison jerky and
Oh yeah, it's
they
good.
had a whole like patties and they would
Yeah, it's good.
that's all
stuff.
they eat is
You never had it?
no.
Is that third or something like they practice the qibla for whenever they slaughter animal back home? Is that something from the sunnah or
To face the qibla?
when the direction of the knife, whatever they kind
Yeah,
of.
it's better, but you don't have to.
You
But
don't
it's
have
better.
to, but they do. You see, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to practice this. How it came about.
Yeah.
It does. Okay. Good. I never heard that. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
Seems to be already. Okay.
And Allah knows best. فإنه يطلى بها السفن ويدهن بها الجلود. Right? So they said, Ya Rasulullah, like, the fat of these dead animals, we use it to smoothen boats, right? Or ships. And I believe it's basically as far as I understand it, they use it on the bottom to make it slippery
Right.
against the water,
Yeah.
right? And they also use it for different skins, right? فقال لا هو حرام. He said, don't do that. It is haram, right? And then he said, قاتل الله اليهود, right? Allah, may Allah destroy the Jews. Now, this saying, the Prophet ﷺ saying, may Allah destroy the Jews, is not, what do you call it? What some may think it is an actionable thing where you're supposed to kill all Jews. It's not what it means. But rather, the Prophet ﷺ is making dua against the Jews in general. Why? Which Jews is he making dua against? The ones who did this. The ones who do this or do this thing. Right? And what is this thing? Is he said that Allah made haram for them duhun al-mayta, right? Shuhum al-mayta, right? Allah made haram for them. So Allah made haram for them specifically. This is haram to use the fat of a mayta, of a carrion. Carrion, is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Allah made haram for them to use it, right? But then they started to make it beautiful and they sold it. And this is something that the Jews do, is something that is haram for them, Like for example, interest is haram for them. They're not supposed to use interest, but they sell it.
That's permissible for them.
Well, they say it is, but it's not,
Yeah.
right? So they do this like alcohol. I believe alcohol is haram for them,
No.
right? It's not.
They drink wine all the time.
But anything that is haram for them, it's okay for them to sell it
Not amongst them.
to others.
Yeah, to others.
Yes. And as a matter of fact, there were some people that started to take this opinion that it is haram for you to sell something that, or it's halal for you to sell something that is normally haram, but as long as you're selling it to kuffar, then it's okay.
Yeah,
I think it's haram to them.
I think I heard that one of the sheikhs mentioning that to Muslim, can harm them.
Yeah, but that's not true.
That's not.
That's not true. The Prophet ﷺ is very specifically saying that it's haram to sell these things. He didn't say haram to sell it to who.
It's in general.
It's haram to everybody.
Yes, he says it's haram to sell it. Period. Right. So if it's haram to sell it, and he didn't mention haram to sell to who, then it's haram to sell to everyone. Doesn't matter if they're not Muslim or Muslim. They're all haram to sell to. Right. So they sold it, and then they ate the price of it. They ate the price of it. Now, I guess this is something we're going to talk about, inshallah, in tafsir a lot in regards to thaman. Because whenever you buy and sell something, you have the buyer, you have the seller, you have the merchandise, and then you have the price. So it's 4 things. Whenever you buy and sell something, you have the buyer, you have the seller, merchandise, and the price. Okay? So when we see this in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this very intricately when he says, for example, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُم بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةَ. Right? We'll talk about this inshallah in tafsir. But the point here, they ate the price. Okay? Meaning, so the Jews were the sellers. The buyers are not mentioned who they are. And then the price is obviously what the sellers gained. Does that make sense? And what was sold was the fat. Does that make sense? So it's important to clarify when you're talking about different entities in a situation, to clarify which is which and what's going where, because that helps you understand everything better. And we're going to have to do this inshallah, especially with the Quran, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he, sometimes you might think that the price is this, but that's actually the merchandise. You might think this is the seller, but that's actually the buyer. Right? So, like, I'll just go ahead and explain it, since I see a lot of questioning faces. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So ishtara means that he buys.
Exchange or
He's buying. Okay, so this is, Allah is the buyer. The mu'mineen are the sellers. Right? So Allah is the buyer, the believers are the sellers. Does that make sense? إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُم. Now, the question is, what is the merchandise? And then what is the price? Okay? So the merchandise is أنفسهم وأموالهم. Does that make sense? And the price is what? Jannah. Exactly. So the sellers is us, hopefully. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from them. What we're selling is ourselves and our money.
all yours.
Huh?
All is his in.
This is the exactly. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying this when he is the owner in the first place. Subhanallah. That's out of his endless bounty and mercy. SubhanAllah. ta'ala. Inshallah, my phone will last. I'm at 20%. It's not bad. Inshallah, it's gonna last. We only have 45 minutes. It's okay.
Should I bring you on?
20% should be enough.
Yeah, it should.
We can use mine.
Inshallah.
You have a charger, have a battery pack.
Oh no, not right now. It's okay. It's fine. I think I'm fine.
I have chocolate.
Yeah, I think it's fine. If it gets too low, then I'll ask for it. So, any questions about that hadith? Again, let me ask this: why is this hadith mentioned here?
Physical action.
Yes. So all of these things, they matter, right? Everything about your heart. We want to get closer to Allah. Getting closer to Allah is not a mystical thing, right? You don't have to jump on a cloud and no. It's your actions that get you closer to Allah, right? I mean, obviously, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who brings you closer to Him, but your actions are the fruit of that.
Okay, selling intoxicant, that imply to those people deliver it too. Sometimes you deliver it, you don't know what merchandise you are carrying in your car. Sometimes, you're traveling from one state to another state to take stuff, just pick it and go. But we don't know what is inside that.
Yeah, if that's not something
storage.
that you can know, then yeah, it's not on you. Allah knows best.
Then you're asking if it's
You know,
allowed or
selling, selling is specific. Allah, Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says selling intoxicant.
There's
Allah.
7 people, right, that are related to alcohol that are forbidden. Like the one who obviously drinks it, who sits with that company, sells it, transports it.
I don't know.
I think there's a hadith that.
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
But nonetheless, the general principle though, it's not just alcohol. Whenever you help someone commit a sin, you're a part of that sin. Right? So, however you might help someone commit that sin, you're a part of it.
About the idols.
Well, people worship idols. Obviously, you don't want to sell those.
Sometimes something as is as toys can be an idol too. So for some people, toys.
Well, if it's something that's usually not used as an idol,
Uh-huh.
right? Then it's okay. But I mean, I could sell a book and somebody could worship a book. There's people who worship cows.
You can sell it, but they can let them worship.
That's their problem. I mean, you're not selling something that is meant to be an idol.
Yeah, they have their specific idols. It's not just like any cow off of Walmart.
Batman is Spider-Man.
Yeah, I mean, they can. You could somebody here in America can go to a farm and buy a cow and they can worship that cow. Right? They could put them in their own
But
farm
you
and
as a
worship.
seller, you don't know what they're going to use it for.
Yeah, that's not your business.
Yeah.
It's not your business. So let's say, for example, you're selling knives. Somebody can take that knife and go kill somebody,
Correct.
but that's not your business to.
Control what's
Right.
Thank you.
And that's why there's laws put in place in regards to especially those types of things. Even in America, you have laws that are put in place to hopefully stop criminals from using that in the wrong way. So in Islamic government as well, you would have laws in place to not allow people to use those things in a wrong way. So you just have to follow those laws. Right? Any other questions? All right, let's move on to the next hadith.
The mantra,
How'd you know it was Yusuf? Because he's wearing blue?
I know them now. Alhamdulillah.
عن أبي بردة عن أبيه أبي موسى الأشعري رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم بعثه إلى اليمن فسأله عن أشربة تصنع بها فقال وما تصنع بها فقال وما هي قال البتع والمزر فقيل لأبي بردة وما البتع قال نبيذ العسل والمزر نبيذ الشعير فقال كل مسكر حرام أخرجه البخاري.
خرجه or أخرجه?
خرج.
So, Abu Burda radiallahu anhu, Abu Burda, rahimahullah, is narrating from Abu Musa al-Ash'ari radiallahu anhu, that he said that the Prophet ﷺ sent him to Yemen. And Yemen was a mostly Christian nation at the time. Okay? Which is interesting because Yemen is completely all Muslim now. SubhanAllah. So he asked him about these drinks that were being created or made in Yemen. I guess it was something that was new to the Arabian Peninsula, so to speak. Right? They're like, what is this new thing that's happening in Yemen? So he said, oh yeah, we have these drinks, they call them al-bitr and mizr. So they're like, so the companions were like, what is that? So al-bitr, he said, is something that comes from honey. And something that's extracted from honey. How it's extracted, doesn't matter. I honestly don't know. And mizr is something that is extracted from barley, I believe. Okay?
Karibo.
Huh?
They call it Karibo and Taj.
Oh, really?
In my country, we have both of them.
Okay, you do?
Yeah.
So I guess it's from the same area.
Yes.
So the Prophet ﷺ, he just, like, because they're trying to figure out what is this drink, what does it do, this and that. So the Prophet ﷺ made it clear. And he said, كُلُّ مُسْكِرٍ حَرَامٍ. Every intoxicant is haram. Now muskir, I don't know what intoxicant really truly means in English, but let me explain what muskir means from Arabic. What does intoxicant mean?
Anything that alters your senses.
Alters your senses. Okay. So a muskir is something that alters your mind. I don't know if that exactly means it alters your senses as well. It would mean the same thing? Okay. So anything that alters your mind, because the explanation of muskir of the scholars, they say mudhibul aql. Something that it changes your normal state of aql, your normal state of mind. Whatever your normal state of mind is, and you take this, you drink it, you eat it, you smoke it, you whatever, then it's haram. Does that make sense? I've had people who've come up to me and said, man, weed, come on, man, it's not haram. They're like, it's from the earth.
It's God's gift.
And I'm like, okay, it's from the earth, but the Prophet ﷺ, kullu muskirin haram. The Prophet ﷺ said everything that makes your state of mind change, it's haram. They say, oh no, but you know, it really doesn't change your mind. It enhances the way you think.
Changes your mind.
So that's exactly what I said. It changes your mind.
I have a question. Can you use it for medicinal purposes? Like, I'll tell you, for like my patients.
So the thing that scholars say is when it comes to medicinal purposes, you have to refer to the doctor, right? So,
because I tell my patients to take it all the time, because I'll tell you why. I have a justification. I mean, like for chemotherapy.
It's pain, right?
No, pain, nausea, appetite. It helps all of that stuff. And so I mean, it's really beneficial in that regard. And I mean,
I understand, but
better than pain meds.
so the way the scholars usually take their approach when it comes to medical purposes is they say refer to a doctor, and they always say refer to a doctor who fears Allah, because the thing is when you go to a doctor who doesn't fear Allah, then he's just trying to make a buck, or he's trying to but rather when you go to someone who fears Allah, he's going to give you the best advice for you. You know what I'm saying? And the thing also about pain, like, just because there's pain doesn't necessarily mean you need pain medicine. You know this better than I do, right? So you gotta really, but again, the scholars, they refer this to the doctor. They don't, as far as I've seen, Allah knows best. They try not to give their opinion about you have to do this and you have to do that when it comes to medicinal issues, when that's not their specialty, right? But obviously, when there's no medicinal problem or whatever, anything that changes your state of mind is haram, right? There's no if and buts and about it. And again, this is mentioned here to be perfectly clear that it's not just alcohol that's haram, right? It's not just like alcohol is mentioned in the Quran. So then Abu Musa al-Ash'ari, he comes to the Prophet ﷺ, he's like, oh yeah, they have these drinks, but they're not really alcohol. I mean, I'm not saying he said that, but it's kind of the understanding that you're getting here. It may not be necessarily be alcohol, right?
Literally,
You get what I'm saying? But the Prophet ﷺ wanted to make sure that it's clear what is the problem with alcohol. The problem with alcohol is the issue that it's actually changing the state of your mind, right? And that makes it haram. Right? So it doesn't matter what kind of drug it is. It doesn't matter what it does. SubhanAllah. I remember I had a car accident, and like I broke my finger here, and at the time I was taking a class, and it was almost time for exams. I was taking differential equations. So they gave me this little cast or whatever, and then they released me from the hospital, and I think they gave me oxycodone, if I remember correctly, for the pain, because it was really bad. So I'm sitting there, and I'm sitting with a guy I'm studying with, and he goes up onto the board, and he's explaining something to me on the board, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I don't understand anything. I didn't understand anything at all. So I was like, you know what? I took one pill. I said, I'm never taking this again, because I had to take my exams.
That happens to me without oxycodone, with math.
So that's an intoxicant.
Yeah. Math is intoxicant for me. It changes my
Stay away from it. Stay away from it. La ilaha illallah. Yeah, so may Allah subhanahu.
This is like similar to it, even if not drink, something that changes people's mind. Also,
But cigarettes, it doesn't change your mind. The issue with cigarettes, and scholars say that because of the data, they say that it's a very high percentage that if you smoke, you're gonna die earlier than predicted, than expected, right? So that's in effect killing yourself. So therefore it's haram because you're killing yourself. Some scholars brought it to the level of makruh, disliked. But Allah knows best. I mean, killing yourself is bad. I mean, your body is an amana, and it is haram to destroy your body. And cigarettes is destroying your body.
Is there any kind of smoking things back in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Like
I don't know of
something
any.
they smoke?
Maybe, but I don't know of any.
No, I never had that.
Yeah, I don't know. Any questions about that hadith?
So they have this drink now
So,
I think it's from it has alcohol.
So there's another hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Whatever a lot of it makes you drunk, a little of it is haram." Right. So if the thing about drinking, that's something that might have a very small percentage of alcohol. Like you can only drink so much without hurting yourself. So the question is, when you drink that much, will you be drunk? And if the answer is no, then a little is halal.
Okay, how about like cooking with alcohol? Because I've had some Muslims make arguments that always burn off this and that, and
I have looked at the difference of opinion of that,
Yeah.
and I can't tell you. I don't know.
Is there like arguments on both sides? Is that what you're saying, or does that mean that it's just not clear?
It's not clear that I can make a determination. So
better stay away, right?
since we don't know, then yeah, I think because my answer is I don't know. I don't know.
Oh, does it? What does it say?
I think it's a lot.
It's a lot.
Right.
Who does?
What?
Yeah, so Fadi.
He says it's halal.
I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I can't make a determination on that because I don't know. It's
But it's the same concept, though. If it's haram and a lot, it's haram and little. It's the same thing. I mean, that's. I don't know,
I just can't make it just, to me, the reason why I can't make a determination, and I've seen the fatwas where people have said it's halal, the reason why it's tough for me to make a determination is because it's just a tough pill for me to swallow, that you're actually using alcohol.
yeah, that's right. It doesn't. It
You
goes
have
against
to buy
everything
Yes.
that
You have to buy it and use it.
Have somebody else buy it.
Even if you take it a small portion or not, the buyer have problem, right? So buying it alcohol
Yeah.
from
Yeah,
the
it
shelf
doesn't,
is from-
it just doesn't sit right with me.
Yes.
It just doesn't. Allah knows best. Let's move on to the next one.
From from the previous, I was expecting someone to question this carrion, the maid. So what about the as we know, where those meats are coming from, whatever, the burger, whatever, like they basically they kill them with the weapon from the top head, some of them they hit them. So they kill those, they're not dead.
They stun them. They don't kill them.
Like
Some
the,
of them
they shoot them to kill, like they basically shoot them. Yes,
Yeah,
the one.
But you see,
Not Five Guys though.
I did.
no, they also do that in Muslim countries. They shoot the animals and then they slaughter them.
Like they
Like,
shoot them to kind of not to move them.
But they don't die with when
Yeah.
you shoot them.
So
They're big animals.
that's a long discussion.
We're not gonna discuss about it even long. Okay, no problem.
Well,
I'll pass.
we talked about halal in
Yeah,
halal
we
meat
did.
in general, right?
Not satisfied,
You
obviously.
gotta go back, yeah.
Yeah, because this is a clear cut say like this is it. Like it's basically the one we talked about was not like this one. So.
Well, the
But
thing
is that
is,
really carrion though? That's the question.
well, the thing is that makes something not carrying, because let's say, for example, the deer.
Yes.
I mentioned the deer
Just hit the
that you hit on the road, and you go out and you slaughter it.
Yeah.
The scholars say the thing that makes it halal is that the blood flowed from it.
Yeah.
But let's say, for example, you hit the deer, 2 days later you slaughter it. Is there going to be any blood?
No.
No. So the thing, the dabit from the mawdu', from the point from the whole thing, is that blood has to flow. Does that make sense?
Yes.
If that blood is flowing, that blood flows out, then it's not a meta. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. That makes sense.
I don't know of any difference of opinion on that, and that's why it was kind of weird to me that I heard people debating this issue about whether something is meta or not, right? Because I mean I don't think that's even the issue here, whether it's a meta or not. Because as long as the blood is flowing, which I think So I've had some mashayikh, I know some mashayikh who've gone to slaughterhouses and saw it, and they're like, the blood flows.
I mean, the heart is beating, so
Yeah,
that's
so-
what.
Yeah, and the blood is flow. So and that's what makes the blood flow, right?
Yeah, the heart.
Right. So the blood is flowing.
I think,
So it can't be. You can't call it a meta.
what I saw was just like they hit them with the weapon and they kind of unskinned them before they even slaughter the neck. You understand what
Yeah, but it's like more stunning. I think it's more like.
Wait a second. You're saying they're skinning them before they slaughter?
No, they hit them with the, no,
Stunning.
slaughter is not there sometimes. Like they just basically.
Wait a minute.
kill
The
them.
slaughter is not there sometimes.
Yes.
Are you
Like
sure?
What happened? Yeah, I mean they hit them with the they will die with the gun.
And they're not doing this.
Yeah.
They not. They just unskin them while
Yes.
their blood inside. Yeah, it's a video.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll share if
But
it is
where is
allowed.
that in? Which country is that? America.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's surprising to me. I don't know.
I
I've
don't
never
think so.
I've never heard of that before.
Okay. Well, I'll share the video.
I'm not saying it's not happening. I'm just surprised by it.
Okay.
But I would
Yeah,
like to
because
see that.
process takes time of slaughtering the neck, that's what you're
Yeah,
saying, right?
right.
So they just kill the animal and.
No, from what I
Skin them.
understood is that slaughtering is just happening by a machine.
Yeah.
I don't know, the videos that he's talking about, I've seen it too,
Yeah.
some of them, it's like.
Because as far as I understood, the FDA requires you to
Slaughter.
do that
Yeah.
right after the stun.
I mean, they had lots of videos.
What kind of animal is it?
You did
Mostly
not watch it,
cows,
so I shared
Okay.
it.
So-
I
so,
shared it.
well-
Was that
well,
what you shared with me?
We'll bring this.
Cows.
Okay, let's. Huh?
Cows.
cow.
The big ones.
Oh, really? They did this to a cow?
Yes.
They were skinning the cow before they.
No, they killed them.
Shoot-
They
shoot them in the head.
Then they just
I understand, but then they. No.
don't see anything like that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm.
Okay. So we'll discuss that later.
Okay.
Let's move on to the next hadith, inshallah. If you don't mind, if I can get the charger, please.
You have a
Jazakallahu
outlet?
khairan.
Yeah, okay.
I do not.
There's an extension there,
Extend it right there.
the white,
That's not gonna reach over.
The white
there.
one.
the white.
Yeah, but that's on the heater.
No, that is
It's gonna trip.
should have colors. I think the green one can go over there too. I don't think they use it this
Take
one
that
for something, right?
That's for this.
Oh,
other
okay.
Type C.
No, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Bring it closer.
Yeah, he got it. He got something. This is for me.
All right. Who's تفضلوا.
Yeah, that's it.
I don't want to do it, you know. My way is so good.
You don't want to embarrass anybody.
I don't want you to feel bad.
I know, you're gonna embarrass all of us.
تفضل.
عن المقدام بن معد
قال المؤلف رحمه الله.
قال المؤلف رحمه الله عن المقدام ابن معد يكرب
ابن معدي كرب.
معدي
المقدام
المقدام
ابن معدي كرب. ها.
ابن معدي كرب قال سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه
عليه الصلاة
وسلم
والسلام.
يقول ما ملأ آدمي وعاء آدمي وعاء شرا من بطن بحسب
من بطن. أها.
بحسب ابن آدم أكلات يقمن صلبه فإن كان لا محالة فثلث لطعامه وثلث لشرابه وثلث لنفسه رواه الإمام أحمد والترمذي وابن ماجه وقال الترمذي حديث حسن.
Yeah. So I feel like I need to do a lot of istighfar before I even talk about this hadith. So this hadith was narrated after the battle of Khaybar. Okay? And I remember actually very clearly when my sheikh was teaching me this hadith, and how I was, like, my mouth was like wide open, like really? Okay? So this hadith, when the Muslims took over Khaybar, Khaybar is an oasis in Saudi Arabia. An oasis is basically a place where it's in the middle of the desert, but it's green, right? They have all types of crops. So what they're used to in Medina, it's a desert, is dates. That's it, right? There's not much other food, right? Food is very scarce in Medina. So now they go and they take over Khaybar, and there's food everywhere. So now they were going to the Prophet ﷺ, some would come complaining about their head, come complaining about their stomach, come complaining about this and complaining about that. And this was also the time the Prophet ﷺ was telling the companions, do this hijama, right? The cupping, right? But eventually the Prophet ﷺ, he told them this hadith, where he said, ما ملأ آدمي وعاء شرا من بطن. That the son of Adam never filled a container worse than his stomach. Like, the worst container you can possibly ever fill is your stomach. SubhanAllah. I mean, let's take that for a second. And you look at all of the scholars who studied Islam and sacrificed for Islam, every single one of them, they all said, you will never be successful if you eat too much. They all said that eating is the enemy of success. They loved being hungry. Being hungry, like actually not eating food, was actually one of the best things that they would refer to their success. Right? Imam al-Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi, the author of the first 42 hadith of this book, he became a scholar in 4 years. Right? A scholar usually takes 40, 50, 60 years to become a scholar. He did that in 4 years. Right? And in those 4 years, he said that he did not lay down. For 4 years, he did not lay down. Because he sacrificed for this deen. And in that sacrifice for this deen, part of that sacrifice, he barely ate. He barely ate anything. You'll find a lot of the biggest scholars in the history of Islam, a lot of them were extremely thin, skinny, right? Because they didn't eat. Eating, the thing that eating does, it brings sleep and it brings laziness, right? But it also brings sickness and disease. There's a hadith. This hadith is weak, but I'll mention it anyways because the scholars, they agree on the validity of the meaning of this hadith, where they say that there was an area that became Muslim, and they sent the Prophet, when they became Muslim, they sent the Prophet ﷺ as a gift a donkey and a doctor, right? So the Prophet ﷺ responded, and he sent the doctor back, and he kept the donkey. And he said, we are a people that we don't eat unless we're hungry. And when we eat, we don't get full. So why would we need a doctor? Right? So again, the hadith is weak, but nonetheless the scholars, they agree that the meaning is consistent with, you know, all of the things that we've learned from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and this hadith mainly being one of them. Right? Again, this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said this in Khaybar, when the companions were getting sick because they were eating too much. Right? They maybe were getting too hyper about all of this food, and they were just consuming, right? So the Prophet ﷺ said that the worst container that you can fill is your stomach. So what's the solution? He said, بِحَسْبِ ابْنِ آدَمْ أَكَلَاتٌ يُقِمْنَ صُلْبًا. That what you, or it is enough, or it is sufficient for you, the son of Adam, to eat enough to make your back stand up straight. And he said akalatun, meaning like small pieces or small bites. Small bites that will make your back stand up. Because you know, when you're super hungry, you start to do this, right? But when you've eaten enough, which is probably not that much, it's probably very early on when you first start eating, you start to do this because you're okay. You're not anymore. You're kind of like this, and it makes your back stand up straight, right? And then the Prophet ﷺ said, فَإِن كَانَ لَا مَحَالَةَ. But if you're not able, right? If you're not able to eat that little, فَثُلُثٌ لِطَعَامِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِشَرَابِهِ وَثُلُثٌ لِنَفَسِهِ. Then a third for your food, a third for your drink, and a third for your air.
So the default is less than that.
The sunnah is just enough so you're not hungry anymore.
Just little bites.
And subhanAllah, we've become a culture of fancy foods, amazing foods, and subhanAllah, I was just making something just before I came here. Making some food. We've become a culture along this time, and subhanAllah, I'm laughing, but it's a sad reality. That food has become so big in our lives that it's just normal to eat a lot, right? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He was describing the kuffar, right? And He says, وَيَأْكُلُونَ كَمَا تَأْكُلُ الْأَنْعَامُ وَالنَّارُ مَثْوًى لَهُمْ. In describing the kuffar, that they eat like animals eat. How do animals eat?
And then stop.
Till they get full.
Yeah.
Till they can't eat anymore. That's Allah's description of the kuffar. Right? And how the Prophet ﷺ is describing the believer here is that you eat enough that makes your back stand up straight. Right? And then if you're not able to do that, like if you have a weakness towards food or whatever, then in that case, the worst case scenario should be a third, and a third. So even in the worst case scenario, some scholars would say that it's impermissible, it is haram to overeat. Haram to overeat. May Allah forgive us. So, mind you though, let's not even talk about the medical issues with this. Because I have spoken to different doctors about the medical issues. And it's pretty, overeating is probably one of the biggest problems in medicine, right? So, but not even looking at that. Let's even consider there's no problems with it. Like the amount scholars talk about this issue in the history of Islam, you'll be surprised. The amount any scholar is talking about how to study Islam, how to sacrifice for Islam, how to go to whatever it is that you're trying to do for Islam, and you look up the books on how to do it, how to do any of these things, they will all tell you. The Shaykh said, he said, who told you have to get 8 hours? He said, the doctors say that. He said, I'm curious. These doctors who studied in medical school, did they sleep for 8 hours when they were in medical school? He said if they did, I definitely would have listened to what they have to say. uh, so, so imagine if you have 24 hours in a day, right? And you sleep for 8 hours. You've got 16 hours left, right? Let's say you have a job. You have 8 hours of work, right? So now you have 8 hours left. And after you've got showers, you've got, restrooms, you've got eating, you've got your chit-chatting. There might be an hour or 2 hours left in the day. There's not much you can get done in that time, right? But if you're sleeping less, basically means you're eating less. So if you're eating less and therefore sleeping less, and now when you're sleeping less, you can seek knowledge more. You can get closer to Allah more. You can do, there's Qiyam al-Layl, there is a lot of things. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us to be a people of Qiyam al-Layl. There's a lot of blessings that you can gain in that extra amount of time that you have, that you're not sleeping 8 hours, right? I literally, who taught me Nahu, this guy was like this tall, maybe a little bit taller. It was like extremely short. So one day he was telling us, he was like, yeah, and I sleep for 4 hours every night. I was like, yeah, shit, 4 hours? I was like 17, 18 years old at the time. He was like, yeah. I was like, how do you do that? He's like, I don't know, I did it all my life. I don't remember ever sleeping more than that. It was just normal. I was like, how? He said, this is how my family raised me. He sleeps 4 hours, that's it. That's all he has ever needed. Now, I'm not saying he's short because of the 4 hours.
I was gonna say.
But mashallah, he's very knowledgeable. Because he's got time. Right? That's the first step to seeking knowledge, is time, right? I mean, obviously now you need the drive, and now there's a lot of other things that come with it. But that's a big step. Right? You have a big advantage over people who are sleeping those 8 hours. Right? I mean, and may Allah forgive me, I was the type of person when I was young, I used to sleep 10 hours, 12 hours. No big deal. If my parents didn't wake me up, I'd sleep all day long if I could. Right? So, the question is how much of a drive do we have in our lives to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in accomplishing good in regards to our sleep, and then therefore correlate it to our food, right? This is definitely a struggle in regards to making sure we eat less. Again, not even thinking about the health side of things, but the amount that we're going to benefit in just our ibadah, just by eating less, is limitless. Like, imagine if you had 2 additional hours in a day, just 2. How much more you can accomplish if you just have. So if you could take that from your sleep, for example, that would be amazing. Now imagine if you had 4 extra hours. What can you do with that? You know what I mean? There's a lot that you can accomplish in this life if you had more time, right? So there's a way to get more time by eating less. By eating less. And that's the most important aspect in regards to eating less, is sleeping less. Also, when you eat less, you have more energy. Because you're not using that energy to recycle the food. Right? I don't know if that's exactly how it works. But
a little bit like that.
Okay. So, but then there's the additional side of your health, right? Eating less is also good for your health. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us to eat the way the Prophet ﷺ ate. You know, Aisha radiallahu anha, she narrated that there would be a moon and a moon and a moon, and there would be no fire lit in the house of the Prophet. Can you imagine that? Not cooking something for 2 or 3 months?
Just surviving on dates.
Yeah, that it survived on al-aswadan, dates and water.
I heard somebody to mention that hadith or saying of Aisha radiallahu anhu is promoting Muslim to be weak in their dunya, like not to be able to work hard to make it, against Muslims. What do you think?
Does that mean the Prophet ﷺ didn't work?
No, that means he had enough, he was rich, he was to do market, right? He used to have money too. So when most of people, when you talk about like, oh, there's nothing food, it doesn't mean there's no food in the house. It doesn't mean no light. They were eating food, but it's not the fire.
He had money at the time of Mecca, but not in Medina. I don't think he had.
No, so towards the end of his life, the Prophet ﷺ did come across a lot of money.
Yeah, ghanima too, sir.
Yes. But he didn't keep any of it for himself.
Right.
When the Prophet ﷺ died, he had nothing.
Yeah. Doesn't mean that he's poor because he's just doing sadaqah. He don't want to keep it for himself.
Yes, he didn't want to keep anything for himself. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just because someone is, some people are mentioning this kind of talk, it created the mind of Muslim. Just don't work, just stay home, or that
No.
kind of things.
No. As a matter of fact, it's an obligation specifically for men to work,
Yes.
because it is a man's obligation to provide for his family,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
So therefore, it is an obligation on a man to actually work. So how can somebody say that?
Yeah, because some people like Sufa,
Ahl Sufa, for example.
they stay in a
But that was their work, though. Their work. What were they doing in the masjid?
There are people who are doing the same kind of things.
No, but what were they doing in the masjid, though?
Of course, they're learning from Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi
Yes.
Wasallam there. Yeah.
So that was their job.
Yeah.
So are these people doing that? They're studying?
Basically, they're learning, so of course they're doing something. Right?
No, I'm asking, is
Yeah.
that what they're doing? Is that they're studying?
No, they just sit down,
No,
waiting,
they're not-
expecting people to give them.
No,
handout.
that's not what Ahl Sufa did.
Yeah.
That's not what they did.
Sometimes they go outside in the masjid after the
No.
Jama'ah prayer.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Then beg people.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
There were some people who came from Yemen to make Hajj during the time of Umar radiallahu anhu. Right? So when they came, they were begging for money. So Umar said, "What are you doing?" They said, "We're the people who depend on Allah. We came here with nothing, depending on Allah." So Umar beat them. Umar radiallahu anhu, he beat them, and he said, "You guys are the opposite of depending on Allah. Depending on Allah is also putting the effort in. Depending on Allah has two parts. Number one is the belief that everything you have and everything that you can get, it comes from Allah. It has nothing to do with your actions. It has nothing to do with I did this and I did that. That's the first part of depending on Allah. The second part of depending on Allah, Allah told you to work. It has to be both. Right? So for someone to say, oh, because the Prophet ﷺ didn't have this and didn't have that, that means I don't have to work? No. No, that's a complete misunderstanding, because the Prophet ﷺ always worked. The Prophet ﷺ was always moving, always doing something. He was never idle. Ever. The only time he was idle was when he was sleeping. And even then, he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him such that his eyes would sleep, but his heart wouldn't. Right? I mean, how can anybody say, oh, I'm being like the Prophet ﷺ, so I'm being lazy? Being lazy is like being like how can anybody say that? That's the Prophet ﷺ was the antithesis of laziness. He was completely the opposite of that. Completely the opposite. As a matter of fact, there's a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Al-Kayyisu man dana nafsahu وعمل لما بعد الموت والعاجز من أتبع نفسه هواها وتمنى على الله. Al-Kayyis is the opposite of a lazy person. Okay? because you have al-kasul is lazy. Kayis is the opposite. Okay? This person who was kayis, there's somebody read a hadith. He said, this is not the hadith, but the person read it wrong. He said, al-mu'minu kisu qatun. Al-mu'min kisu qatun. Kis is what? A bag, right? What's qatun? Cotton. You see, a believer is a bag of cotton. But that's not the hadith. The hadith is al-mu'minu kayyisun fatin. Kayyisun fatin. Right? They just read it wrong because of the wrong dots. But anyways, going off topic here. But al-mu'minu kayyisun fatin. Prophet ﷺ said a believer is kayyis. Kayyis is again the opposite of lazy. Therefore, a person who is lazy is not a believer, because a believer is the opposite of that. Fatin. And fatin is witty, I think is the best translation of fatin. Right? Smart. Witty. Right? But anyways, in the other hadith, al-kayyis, which is also the opposite of lazy person, man dana nafsahu. Dana tariq is like when you pave it. When you pave the road, I want to say it's a dayn, but I don't think that's the right mustar for it. But anyways, this verb is used for like paving. Okay? So what happens when you pave a road? You have to torture the road. Right? You gotta dig. You gotta put a whole bunch of stuff on it. You gotta pound it. Right? And even back during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when they would make a road, they would like basically kind of destroy it so that it becomes a pathway for people to pass on. Right? So that process is important to have a road that you feel comfortable on. Does that make sense? So, but you do this to yourself though, if you are kayyis. And this is what a believer is that you're constantly disciplining yourself, torturing yourself to make yourself. Does that make sense? It's a constant discipline and torture of yourself to become better and better and better. This is what a believer does, right? Man dana nafsahu, al-kayyis man dana nafsahu, wa amila lima ba'da al-maut, and he works for what is after death. His focus is not this life. His focus is the next life. Right? And we said this is a believer because al-mu'minu kayyisun fatin. Does that make sense? Wal-ajiz, the lazy person or the unabled person, man atba'a nafsahu hawaha. He's always following his desires. And this is what a lazy person is doing. He's just thinking, oh, what am I going to eat? What am I going to fulfill this desire with? How am I going to fulfill that desire? How am I going to fulfill that desire? Right? This is al-ajiz. Because he's always desires. وَتَمَنَّى عَلَى اللَّهِ. And he's saying, oh, Allah's going to forgive me. Allah's going to forgive me. I'm good. Allah's going to take care of me. I'm Muslim. I'm okay. I make my salah. I pray. I'm okay. Oh, I pray, so I'm okay. Or I fast, so I'm okay. Whatever it is that you're gonna fill that blank with, I do this, so I'm okay. That's scary. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, أَفَأَمِنُوا مَكْرَ اللَّهِ. Do they feel safe from the punishment of Allah? فَلَا يَأْمَنُ مَكْرَ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْخَاسِرُونَ. The only ones who feel safe from Allah's punishment are the losers. Meaning the ones who are going to the hellfire. No one should feel safe from Allah's punishment. You always have to think that you're not doing enough. You always have to feel that you're not there yet. Not, oh, I pray and I'm fine. Or I'm a Muslim. I'm not going out here drinking alcohol. I'm not doing this bad thing. Is I need to be like the. And we have to be fixated on that. I'm constantly trying to be like him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us to be with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. But this has to be our mentality to get saved from the hellfire. It can't be, oh, I'm good. Allah is going to forgive me. Allah ghafurur rahim, as they say. That's the wrong mentality. Because now I feel safe from Allah's punishment. And only the losers feel safe from Allah's punishment, the ones who are going to the hellfire. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that. So, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Can you repeat that last part? When عاجز من تاب نفسه? Is that what you said?
والعاجز من أتبع نفسه هواها والعاجز من أتبع نفسه هواها وتمنى على الله. And this hadith is in Riyadh al-Salihin. We're almost done here, so we're gonna go to Riyadh al-Salihin after this, inshallah.
Can't wait. Got 2 more left for next week, inshallah.
SubhanAllah, Riyadh al-Salihin is by the same author. May Allah have mercy on him.
Brother, can you send the link for that in the group so that we can buy the Riyadh Salihin, is it English, right?
Yes.
Not Arabic, right? Can you
Yeah,
send the link in the group, please?
I'll send it, inshallah.
Thank you. So that we can buy it. I heard that it's online also, but I like the
Yeah,
hard
it's
copy.
the English translation has 2 volumes. I believe the one that I'm gonna send. Although I found a lot of mistakes in that one, but inshallah, I think we should still stick with that one.
There's an online version of it too, I think so.
Oh, I don't know. I'll look, inshallah.
Okay, let us know. Jazakallah. Good.
Wa iyyakum. Any other questions? Did I finish it? والعاجز من أتبع نفسه هواها وتمنى على الله. وتمنى على الله. تمنى على الله is like,
Putting your hopes in Allah, right?
yeah. So there's 2 types of tamanni. There's raja, and then there's tamanni. So there's 2 types of hope, raja and tamanni. Tamanni is hoping for something that is not very likely to happen, right? So, like the poet said, ألا ليت الشباب يعود يوما فأخبره بما فعل المشيب. That he's hoping that he'll be young again, so that he can tell his young self what old age did to me, right? But I mean, that's not going to happen. He's never going to be young again, right? So he hoping for something that is almost that is very, very, very unlikely to happen. So that's the tamanni here, right? And then there's raja, that you're hoping for something that could happen. And that's what we're supposed to do for Jannah. We're supposed to have raja for Jannah. And we hope for Jannah. So in this tamanni, that they're hoping that Allah is going to forgive them when they did nothing to get it. Right? They did nothing to get that forgiveness. The people who are closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ones who think that Allah will not forgive them. And then because they think Allah won't forgive them, they're constantly asking for it and begging for it because they have the hope. But then they're also fearful that He won't forgive it. So they're constantly saying, Ya Allah, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. So the Prophet ﷺ, the best of mankind, used to ask Allah for forgiveness at least 100 times a day. So if he was afraid that Allah won't forgive him, how can we feel like, oh, I'm good. I'm a good Muslim, I'm fine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from that mentality. Because that mentality, unfortunately, is a disease. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Alright, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.